Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Historical Men in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about Crips founder Stanley Tookie Williams. Now, Stanley Tookie Williams III was born in 1953 in Shreveport, Louisiana. And he was christened Stanley Tookie Williams III, but usually went by his middle name, Tookie, and that's how he was known all throughout his life. And Stanley Tookie Williams wound up on the road to becoming a man in crisis ever since he was 1 year old when his father in Shreveport, Louisiana, abandoned the family. And after the father abandoned the family, Stanley Tookie Williams' mother moved from Louisiana to Los Angeles, California, and settled in South Central Los Angeles. And as she settled in South Central Los Angeles, she struggled to maintain a life for Stanley as a single mother. And as she was trying to work multiple jobs to support them, what happened was Stanley Williams wound up becoming a latchkey kid who was basically taking care of himself while his mother was at work. And as he was taking care of himself as his mother was at work, what happened was he was not getting the structure that a boy needed by having his father in the home. And without that father to lay a foundation for structure for Stanley Williams, he never understood what order was in his life due to the dysfunctional situation he was raised in. And as he was raised without that father to provide him structure and teach him male life skills, he learned male life skills and male survival skills from the males in the neighborhood who were on the streets every day. And these hustlers basically taught him dysfunction from day one. Now, these hustlers were beta males who basically never learned how to function as men, and a lot of these men basically were just on the streets with no focus or direction, and he would make most of his money as a child working hustles for these hustlers who would bet on just about anything, such as who could spit the furthest, who could urinate the furthest, who could throw a rock the farthest, or cockfights, cricket fights, fish fights, or whatever was there. And there were street fights between kids who were as young as 6 years old and people old as 50 years of old. And again, because the hustlers would bet on these fights, this is how Stanley Tookie Williams learned how to, one, fight, and two, learned how to make money. He learned how to make money in a dysfunctional fashion because there were no men in the community to provide structure for that community, provide focus for that community, or direction for those males. And as a result of him learning manhood from beta males, he never learned how to function as a man growing up as a boy, seeing a functional model for manhood, because what he grew up in was a dysfunctional life paradigm that many black males grew up in due to the racism and white supremacy that kept many black men out of the job market, where we saw the woman going to work on the bus every day, and you saw the men just basically sitting in the neighborhood. And as you saw the men sitting in the neighborhood without a focus or direction, this is the model that Tookie got as a boy, because he didn't see any men in the neighborhood going to work or working at businesses. So He just learned how to hustle, and he was basically scavenging through life, doing these hustles here and there, and also was paid to take care of dogs after dog fights, and even was paid to participate in street fights. And as he was a teenager, he gained a reputation as a street fighter and was so violent that he basically was expelled from George Washington Preparatory High School and was denied entry into other high schools in the South Central area because he was allegedly too intimidating. Now, as Stanley Williams was growing up as a teenager, there was a rise in juvenile crime because of these boys not having any sort of male structure or guidance on how to be a man. And as these boys heard about the Black Power movement from these people who were not a part of the Black Panther Party, they got this misinformation regarding Black Power, and they decided they wanted to be a part of the Black Panther Party, but didn't really understand what the Black Panther Party was all about. And this is what led to a rise of juvenile crime as alleged older gangs disbanded to join the Black Power movement, and Stanley Tookie Williams was one of those individuals who wanted to be a part of the Black Power movement, but didn't really understand the discipline and structure that was established for the Black Panther Party, because when it came to the Black Panther Party was an organization that was filled with order and structure from men like Huey Newton, who basically, again, created the Black Panthers to provide structure and order in the black community so that there would be a structure and an order to be able to protect black people from police brutality from rogue white police officers, and also protect black people from those individuals in the black community, such as those outside gangs that wanted to terrorize it. Unfortunately, what happened as the Black Power movement went on, there were a lot of black agents from white supremacy sent into the black community, and these individuals wanted to go and try to create narratives regarding the Black Power movement, and they were the ones who persuaded these gang members to disband their gangs to join the Black Power movement and not really have that structure and order that the Black Panther Party had as an organization. And as these individuals came together, what they were doing was looking to go out and fight in the streets as related to just fighting each other in these different groups. And Tookie Williams became a part of these groups as a street fighter known for his viciousness and willing to fight older youths, and earned a lot of respect from different gang members in these different gangs, and wanted to go and be this guy who wanted to go again fight for black power. But his whole plan to fight for black power was one that was a complete mess, because again, he did not have that father in the home to teach him male life skills and male survival skills, because a man who wants to be a leader doesn't need to fight with his hands. No, a man who is a leader is someone who has been taught structure and order and taught how to set a course as related to whatever goal he wants to pursue. And he has goals that are logical and feasible, but Tookie Williams didn't have that, and he was out here looking to gain respect from gangs in different fights. And as he did this, what happened was by the age of 15, he was arrested for car theft and eventually wound up being sent to juvenile hall. And while he was sent to juvenile hall, he was introduced to Olympic weightlifting by the facility's gym coach, which sparked an interest in bodybuilding. And when he was released in 1971, he was bigger and stronger. But sadly, even though he was bigger and stronger, he did not have that focus and direction to be a leader like the way a boy with a father in his life would be. And as a result, instead of him looking to empower black people by giving them knowledge and giving them direction as related to life, he looked to become the biggest leader of the biggest gang in the world, not understanding that gangs are not an organization that empower black people, because gangs by design are terrorist organizations, and they are designed to terrorize and intimidate people in a community and tear that community completely down, and are just as oppressive as the racist police officers in Los Angeles who were rogue. So instead of building a force that would build up the black community, sadly, due to the dysfunctional way Stanley Tookie Williams was raised, he created a counter force that basically wound up terrorizing the black community. And instead of him being the leader he imagined in his mind, he wound up becoming a useful idiot and tool for white supremacy, who wanted to go and see black people not be able to take their economic and political power, which is what the Black Panthers were trying to give black people. And instead of him working on the mission of the Black Panthers, he basically wound up working against all of the principles and the mission of the Black Panthers by going out and looking to be the biggest leader of the gangs in Los Angeles. And as he was released from prison, he was basically out here looking to work with different gangs, to the point where he was looking to form this gang known as the Crips. And as he looked to form this gang known as the Crips, which were known for dressing in these leather jackets with starched Levi's jeans and suspenders, this gang basically was, and they also wore blue, and they were known, the whole purpose of the Crips was to eliminate all street gangs and create a bull force neighborhood watch in South Central. Now, this whole plan by Stanley Tookie Williams was completely misguided, and again, misguided because he never had that father or that male figure to teach him how men operate, because the way men operate is completely different from the way a beta male operates. With a man, there is, again, a structure as related to how he operates. There is an order to how he does things, a sequence of steps that he takes to achieve goals, and there's a direction where he wants to go to create tangible results. And he also creates a system to maintain that order. And this was the thing that is the difference between a gang such as the Crips and an organization such as the Black Panther Party. And because Stanley Williams didn't understand the difference, he thought he could use gangs to be able to create this bull force to protect black people. But you cannot protect people with individuals who have been taught to terrorize people, because people who are taught to terrorize people are no different than the rogue police officers who brutalize people, and you can't have them be a neighborhood watch if those individuals are involved in criminal activity. That was the mistake that Stanley Tookie Williams made as related to trying to recruit gang members to be a part of his so-called neighborhood watch, and again made that mistake because he basically did not have that father in his life. Because you cannot ask a criminal to protect people, because what they do is they only want to help and support crime. Moreover, when it comes to those who are in the criminal organizations such as gangs, what they do is that they push out all of the good working class black people out of the community, and they push them out because as that bull force, they bully all of the working class black people because they become envious and jealous of them, because they're emotional and they are taking things personal about that person having opportunities that they have. Even worse, they take away opportunities from children because they want all the children to follow them in a monolithic fashion. And this is what happened with the gangs. They took away a whole lot of kids' the ability to dream because they wanted to fit all the kids into boxes that fit into the acceptable boxes for white people in being gang members. And again, this is what he was thinking that he could do, create this neighborhood watch But the whole thing is this neighborhood watch basically wound up terrorizing those black areas of South Central and basically were just as brutal as the police and didn't really help anything because what this did was make it twice as miserable in South Central. Basically, his gang was a useful tool for white supremacy in doing their dirty work because they, one, were going out here perpetuating the racist stereotypes that white supremacists wanted to see regarding the black brute. Two, they were out here participating in crime by going out here and terrorizing the decent black people in the community. Three, they were corrupting the kids in the community by forcing them to join their gangs for protection, taking away their freedom and liberty. And as they became the biggest gang in South Central, sadly achieving Tookie Williams' goal, this basically led to holdout gangs forming an alliance to form the Bloods, and this led to the Crips-Bloods rivalry, which basically wound up destroying life in South Central and Inglewood, California, making life miserable for foundational black Americans, all because you had a male who did not get the life skills that he needed to be a man and did not get the leadership and organizational skills that he needed to be a man. And instead of him being established as a leader, he became a de facto leader. And this de facto leader, because he wound up, there were people who were allegedly murdered or incarcerated, and there was nobody really there to really lead the organization. And this lack of leadership and under a beta male basically created a lot of chaos in the streets of Los Angeles. And as it led to this chaos, Stanley Tookie Williams did what beta males do, creating a double life for himself, where he was a counselor and then was also running the operations of the Crips. And again, doing what beta males do, living in, trying to make a smooth world for himself as an anti-gang youth counselor in Compton, but living in a secret world running the Crips in Los Angeles. Textbook beta male behavior, because with beta males, what they do is they live double lives in order to have their smooth world. They'll have one world where they're sitting there and they're making it look like they're the good guy and doing everything right. But in the secret world, they are expressing their natural masculinity and natural sexuality by participating in these antisocial behaviors. And that's what Stanley Tookie Williams was doing, all while studying sociology at Compton College, and then spending his as the counselor and studying sociology, and then participating in spending his free time in numerous violent attacks against the Bloods. Again, not looking to empower black people, but looking to destroy the lives of black people, not really helping black people, walking far off the road of black empowerment, if he ever was on it, like many of the gang members who basically, again, were not seeing how white supremacy basically was controlling the whole community as related to trying to undermine the work of the Black Panthers by bringing in agents and outsiders to have them talk about being a part of a Black Power movement, when in actuality they were ironically taking power away from foundational black Americans. Now, in 1976, Tookie Williams was wounded in a drive-by shooting while sitting on this porch in Compton, and this was done by members of the Bloods as they shot at Williams, who was letting his dog out for a walk in the evening. Now, after he got hit, he was shot in both of his legs, and doctors told him he would never walk again. However, Stanley Williams did an intense workout, and as he did this workout, he was able to regain his ability to walk. Unfortunately, he wound up developing a substance abuse problem as related to smoking PCP. Now, he had been dabbling in drugs since he was 12 years old and befriended a neighborhood pimp. And as he did this, working with this pimp to run errands for him, he would give Stanley Williams drugs and money, and he started to get involved with PCP and barbiturates known as Red Devils, and this basically returned to taking drugs led to him winding up on a road to a major decline. Now, his maternal grandmother, who he was close to, died in 1976, and he lost his counseling job in 1977. And after his smooth world wound up falling apart, he then wound up in a situation where he got implicated in a robbery. And after he got implicated in that robbery at that group home that he worked at, and they said that the two youths there that did the robbery were ones that he supervised, he was denied an opportunity to compete in an amateur bodybuilding contest when it was discovered he was a gang leader. And once his worlds wound up colliding, the only thing he could do was appear on the Gong Show as a pose-down routine, and then eventually the whole life that he had wound up falling apart, and he wound up in a psychiatric ward for some time as a result of using the PCP and supporting his drug habit by intimidating and robbing drug dealers in South Central. Now, after all of this went on and his life just basically was falling apart, eventually he was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder in 2 of 3 separate incidents as related to crimes that had happened. And after being arrested and charged and then convicted in 1981 of these crimes, he basically wound up getting sentenced to death. And as he wound up getting sentenced to death for these murders that he allegedly was implicated with, such as an event that happened at I believe it was a hotel where several Asian people were wound up murdered. Again, this led to Stanley Tookie Williams winding up in prison for the rest of his life, and he wound up in prison trying to appeal his cases for his life until he ran out of appeals in about 2005, and in around 2005, that's where he wound up not being able to get any more appeals as a result of his whole situation, and spent several years in solitary confinement for assaults on guards. But eventually he had no more appeals, and eventually wound up being the first person in California to be executed in that blue state in years. Now, California hadn't executed a person in years, and Stanley Tookie Williams basically wound up becoming the first person in, I believe, over 20 or 30 years to be executed. And a lot of people thought that Stanley Tookie Williams' execution was something racist, because there were people who participated in far more heinous crimes, such as Charles Manson, who did the Manson family murders. But Stanley Tookie Williams was the one that wound up being executed with a lethal injection in a blue state that was notoriously against the death penalty. And that's where people have some things to say about him winding up being publicly executed, and believe that his execution basically was done for racial reasons. That's what people say about the death of Stanley Tookie Williams, the founder of the Crips. That's what they believe happened as related to his case. But when I take a look at Stanley Tookie Williams, he was basically on that road to this whole sad, tragic death, all due to the fact that he did not have a father in his life. He did not have that father in his life to provide him with structure, that father there to teach him male life skills, that father there to teach him male survival skills, that father there to give him guidance and structure and teach him how to lead like a man. And because he didn't have a father there to teach him how to be a leader, he wound up following dysfunctional beta males and wound up becoming a beta male himself. And as a beta male who was looking to get power, he wound up creating chaos when he formed his gang, the Crips, which ironically was supposed to bring order to the black community, but wound up bringing more chaos and terror due to the dysfunctional values and ideas that he learned. And instead of him empowering people like the Black Panthers that he saw from afar, what Stanley Tookie Williams did was be the useful idiot for white supremacists who wanted to see the black community remain at the bottom, and basically weaponized guys like Stanley Tookie Williams to be the Pookies in the black community, weaponized them to become the people who would terrorize the black community and be their overseers, because that's what those gang members were, overseeing the black community for the white supremacist leftist slave masters, overseeing the black community and making sure that the best and brightest kids were not on a road to academic success, but on a road to becoming a part of a gang and being a part of the prison pipeline from public schools. That was the whole way that Stanley Tookie Williams was used, because he did not have that father or real male leadership to teach him how to be a man, not teaching him how to work like a man, and instead he learned how to hustle in the streets. And as he learned how to hustle in the streets, he basically finessed generations out of their ability to actualize their potential. Not only was he a man in crisis, but he created generations of black males who became men in crisis, because he took away their liberty and their ability to make a choice. Because these gangs, what they would do is force you to be their version of black. I go in depth on this in my novel, Spellbound. He created generations of spellbound black people who thought that being a gangster was a real black person, when in actuality many of these black males were learning was how to be black brutes, and black girls were learning how to be black Jezebels under the dysfunctional value system that the gangs created on the West Coast. And again, Stanley Tookie Williams wasn't just a man in crisis. He created generations of men in crisis, and created generations of men in crisis because he just did not learn how to be a man. And even worse, as he was becoming this leader of these gangs, he wound up being the blind person who was leading the blind, and drove all of the West Coast black folks out there in South Central community straight into a ditch, to the point where they wound up losing their community due to gentrification, and lost their community due to gentrification because you had generations of boys who didn't learn how to become men, because Stanley Tookie Williams basically was the useful idiot who took them all on the road to becoming generations of men in crisis. Now, this was a video requested by a viewer, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation for a minimum of $15 to the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box, or you can send that donation to PayPal for a minimum of $15, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you want to learn more about how males wind up on the road to becoming men in crisis, and all the life skills that they wind up missing out on, that wind up leading them on a road to dysfunction that destroys communities and destroys families, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. That's all I have to say for this installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series. You can rate, comment, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.